thing is. Here we go. Good morning, Kathy.
Hi, how you doing?
Good. Hello, I'm Kimberly Tanner, and I'm the director of the Access Office at Valdosta State University. I'm here with Dr. Kathe Lowney, professor of sociology here at VSU. I'm proud to say that Dr. Lowney is also the most recent recipient of the University System of Georgia's Regents Teaching Excellence Award. Is that right? That's a long thing to put on a vita, but I'm sure you'll handle that. Kathe, we started working together in 2010 to reimagine how disability might be viewed on our campus here in Valdosta, Georgia. Specifically, you and I worked on the relationship between our office and faculty.
Right.
Let's have a little discussion about our campus culture prior to that time, prior to when we started to make this shift on campus. Can you recall any messages that might have been sent from disability services, either intentionally or unintentionally, that impacted perceptions that you or your colleagues had about working with students with disabilities on campus?
I don't recall the exact wording, but I think an impression was often a sort of legalistic, you better be right, do it this way, or else you're in trouble. And I don't think it was intentional, but, you know, use this precise wording, sort of, or else. And it wasn't always from your office, but I think it was reinforced from deans at the start of the semester meetings. And so it was, I think, the nonverbal message is sort of fear. You know, don't screw this up, faculty.
Okay.
You know, lawsuits are certainly more pervasive, and, you know, be on the right side or else.
Right.
And so I think it probably unknowingly put up some barriers. Not as, we're not partners, but it's sort of like, you're the sort of police.
Yes, the ADA police.
Yes.
I have a badge that says that now.
You know, and so
Yeah.
it wasn't how it ought to be, how it should be, but I think it was the perception. And I think you've changed that among a lot of faculty.
We've worked pretty hard.
We have.
Pretty hard. So when, as a faculty member, you feel fear, or that's the impression that maybe other people were fearful, how do you think that impacted your relationships, your working relationships with your students with disabilities?
I think it was like, I have to do exactly what this letter says. I can't vary a single thing, you know, and sort of, if I'm going to vary, I better vary on a way that I think is way towards the student, even if I pedagogically am not quite so sure.
Okay.
You know, so that if I'm going to be cited, I'm going to be cited for sort of overly being on the student's side instead of the other way around. Mm-hmm. You know, but again, that sense of just, oh no. You know, and I think it probably impacted students like, oh no, I have, unfortunately, one of them.
Yeah.
You know, in the class.
So the faculty didn't want one of them because of the pressure?
Yeah,
and the students didn't want to be one of them.
Right.
To put that pressure on their faculty member. Okay.
Or on themselves of being identified.
Interesting, yeah.
You know, and so it just made things more tense.
Yeah, absolutely. I felt that tension.
I'm sure, because I'm sure every time we picked up the phone and talked with you, it was like, is she taking notes? Is this, you know, am I about to be in trouble?
Right.
And that isn't what you were about, but that's our perception of what a conversation with you was going to be about.
Absolutely. And you and I...
And then you were always pro-student, because you were defending them, and we were always sort of in the wrong.
Right. Right. Understood. Yeah, we had a lot of situations where it was never anything intentional, but it was just... whether it was the language we used or maybe the process we used that gave it that feel. let's talk a little bit about the language, because I know there, over the last few years, you and I have talked a lot about language.
Right.
And I'm wondering if we can give some examples of maybe some of the words that we look at now and think, oh my gosh, did we say that? Is that the language we use?
Well,
wow.
It may not always be in the written documents, but I think one of the language that exudes from you whenever you're out and around is we're partners. And I think that is a sea change.
Okay.
Now, because it's this sense of, you know, your office, students and faculty, let's sit down, let's talk together, and let's come up with something that the student, the faculty can live with, for the student, for the faculty seeing what the students' needs are, but also the integrity of the class.
Right.
And I think that last one was often in that fear model, not so important. It was like,
I think you're right.
you know, it was like, it's the integrity of this student getting, you know, and not suing us was sort of like overarching.
That was the goal.
Yeah.
The goal wasn't to provide an accessible environment necessarily. That wasn't what we thought as our end goal. Our end goal was staying out of the court system.
Right, making the
Okay.
student happy.
Okay.
No matter if we thought it was outlandish.
Okay.
And we've
Yeah.
had some conversations with students
Oh, yeah.
where we've said, no, for this class's tasks, that request is out, maybe not outlandish, but out of bounds.
Right.
You know, and I think probably 5-10 years ago, most faculty would fall out of the chair to hear a service provider say that to a student.
Yeah.
Because it
Yes.
was like whatever that student wanted, so we don't get a lawyer
Yes, we
involved.
don't get
Absolutely.
trouble. Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, so that is, I think, such a sort of construction and language sea change.
Right.
You know, that there are some limits. Well, we need to look at what the class is all about, how the class is being delivered, what are your needs, but
Right.
what are also the needs of integrity of all the other students and the ethics, etc.
Right. Right. Okay.
And so, I mean, and I think even, although we haven't got the language you and I both would like for syllabi, we're still
getting closer.
We're getting closer, but even some of that is more about empowering both faculty and students to work together.
Right. Empowering language. We talked very clearly about. We had a lot of must.
Yes, and
Statements.
shoulds.
Yeah, and should is better than must, but we've come a long way. I recall that we had a lot of separation between faculty and students too.
Yes.
And now we talk more about working together on design elements and essential course functions and things like that.
And responsibility onto the students.
Mhm.
One of the things I really love is the changes that we've made in the last couple of years about the testing.
Okay.
You know, that I don't have to call or email your office. It's the student's responsibility to let you know there's a test coming up. I like that because they're a partner in this.
Right, right.
You know, and so they need to take an active part in saying, okay, you know, I need to get the process going.
Right.
You know, and then Jessica reaches out to the faculty member, but it starts with the student. Instead of, no, it's my job to remember, oh, I have to call the access office to get that.
Right.
That we're putting ownership and responsibility on the student.
As the same as would be on other students.
That's
though.
right.
It's not.
That's right, it's not
Yeah.
special, but it's that sense of
Right.
this is your class.
Yeah. Let's
Do what you know.
this
Do what you
together.
have to do to succeed. Same as we would with another student. You know, if a student is ill, you know, and they have to contact,
Mhm.
you know, and let me know. You know, it's that same
There's
process.
an expectation there that we're going to communicate together.
Yes.
And I know you do that for all your students, even if you have hundreds of them in your classes teaching super sections. Still not quite sure how you manage that, but we're appreciative. So, as we were just saying, there is great power in language.
Yep.
And as I went through the past few years, and each day I seem to learn a little bit more about ways to best work with faculty, and we talked about the partnership using that language. Are there any other things that you think are out of bounds? Like if we're doing a document, or what is something that's probably going to turn a faculty toward that perception that we talked about that we had prior to 2010?
I mean, my perception of those forms, the accommodation letters,
Yes.
Was, given the student's concern, issue, I don't know if it said must or should, but that was the implication.
Yes.
Do the following,
Yes.
Like if it was time and a half, it wasn't, that's a negotiated with you and the student, and if necessary, your office, it was like, I have to give them time and a half. Even if it's a 5-minute quiz, or something, I have to do that. And how am I going to do that if it's the whole test? And where do I move them? If the class, all of those. But it was like whatever's on that letter, I have to do.
Right. How about the word mandatory?
Yes.
How do faculty respond to that word?
That
you're aware of.
Again, that's sort of the the hammer of the court. Sort
Yes.
of you must This is
I
mandatory.
learned that one quickly, because in some circles, mandatory just means, this is a process that always happens. But if you say, here's what we need you to do, if you say, and this is mandatory, it just changes the whole relationship.
It does.
So it's just a small word, but it's just in the academy, that's a big
And my guess
word.
is, at least for some students, that was a tough word too, because I had some that would say, I know it says that, but I really don't think I'm going to need time and a half. But if you have to do it, I'll take it, but I will use it, So they sometimes were sort of saying, I'm not quite like it says on the paper, but that's what the standard language is for what I have, as opposed to who I am.
So the
Again, see them more individually also.
So they were feeling pressure
Sort of cookie cutter.
Interesting.
My label
Yes.
is this, here's what you're supposed to do for that label, instead of, can we see on the first test if I need some extra time, or something.
Excellent. And
But just like,
that
nope,
works
I have
better
to do.
now.
I think it's much more of just a conversation, and the language on syllabi. Again, it's not quite where both of us would like it to be, but it isn't. It's more of come see the faculty member, come see me, not you must be registered. And I know that's still a legal requirement, but the way it's phrased is more inviting.
Absolutely.
Is more just person to person, instead of this, we're checking a box on a form.
Yeah, or this power structure.
So that we don't get sued.
Yes.
Well, I did tell them this. And so I just think it can change the dynamics of the relationship, the language.
Absolutely. So we have gotten a lot accomplished in the past few years. We have a lot to do. But let's talk a little bit about some of the experiences that we've had since we started this journey together that perhaps influenced a change on our campus, and maybe why we think that did influence a change. So what are some of the things that we actively did together that helped develop an understanding between our office and the faculty?
Teaching together, which I have loved and I want to do again. But,
we will.
But so we've taught a disability and film perspective course, which is a 2-hour course in the sort of core curriculum twice. Once in person and once online. And we initially sort of did online to try and model, not a perfect online course, but at least to understand the process and try and find the tripwires and trip over them and fix them. And we found some.
We found many.
We found many, many, many. But for me, that was so helpful, and our students were so helpful in, again, being in a conversation with us and in a partnership with us, both classes of students. But I've simply, for me that day where Mario, who was the graduate assistant, called me up, and he said, I saw your PowerPoints online. Would you like to come over and hear them on using JAWS, the sort of screen reader software? And, I sat there and I'm going, Sure, I'm a little busy too. And then it's sort of light bulb, like, he probably's not calling me because it's all great and glory and he's going to pat me on the back. So I probably need to go, and so I rearranged and got there in about an hour. And I had followed what I thought was the standard PowerPoint technology advice, which is hardly any punctuation. And it read 45 slides as one long 10-minute sentence.
Yes.
And I was embarrassed, absolutely dumbstruck. How could I have done this? How could anybody have used this software and not told me? And there were probably two who might have. And I'm going, were they so scared to tell me that they thought I might react negatively? I tracked them down and wrote them emails that night. And this is like from 5 or 10 years before, but just saying, I don't know why I never did that. And, maybe you didn't use it, maybe you felt it was, okay, but if you did, I'm so sorry. But it was like, oh my God, it's punctuation. It is so simple. And almost every time we've presented on this campus, we have people have that same, what I call V8 moment, like, oh my God. I remember several faculty sitting there and you could just see them saying, I do that all the time. I do that all the time. Right. And I know we've changed the instructional technology department. Yes. Because there's been enough of them that have come that it's like, we are teaching that almost immediately to our students.
Right, just ways to design online materials to be accessible. And I think the difference there was that a lot of times as a disability service provider, I would say, oh, there's this technology, so you need to do it this way. And that we never really went the extra step to show faculty, here's what students are using. So there was no way for faculty to really envision what the barriers might be.
Or, I'm a Windows, up until I got the iPad, but all of my stuff at home, I'm a Windows-based computer. So when we kept having these students go, I can't see the video, I never even thought to ask them, are you using Macs or Apple products? Yes. And that was our problem.
Yes.
In the online course, it was every student who was using an Apple product was having trouble getting, our video links to work. That would never have crossed my mind to even ask them.
Right.
And it wasn't that hard to fix once we knew what we were looking for, but that sense of, you just sort of assume that everybody must do it like you do.
Right.
About technology, etc. And our students are using so much software and hardware that's very different than what many of us might have, that you just can't make that assumption. And it's little hiccups in software that can become big in the classroom. Absolutely. Or especially if you're flipping the class or completely teaching online, if they can access that, how do they do the discussions? How do they do the papers? How do they interact with the other students about the video or something? And no school has enough sort of technicians to be able to be in every class to help with that. So you got to learn some of it a bit ourselves.
Right.
Or at least a checklist of what to ask. Maybe not how to fix it, but what to ask.
So it sounds like as you learn some of the software that some students with disabilities might use, you took that lesson and you were able to apply it across the board to all your students.
And absolutely. And it's amazing how, quote, not disabled students love that technology as well. Mm-hmm. And again, teaching a super section of about 300 people, the captioning in that big of a classroom, turning captioning on for every video is very helpful for students who are sitting at a distance, where in that big room, even though it's a new building and it's pretty good acoustically, there are some dead spots or harder spots to hear, that there they are. They can follow along and that's not a problem. And I have gotten in SOIs, I'm so glad that you turn the captioning on. You know, it's so nice. If I sort of zone out, I'm right back into it because there it is.
Okay.
And so that sense that all of us benefit.
Right.
Not just, and that's
From
again
good design.
from good design,
Yeah.
where before it was I'm doing this for this special student,
And it's
more
only,
work, you know, or
it's
something.
on this letter, and that's
Yes, and I have
the only
to.
reason I would do it.
That's
if
right.
I was told I had to. Okay, that's a huge change.
And I think also where I've noticed that for me was I don't have what I would call a sort of visual design kind of eye. And so what makes sense to me is often like just lots of links,
Mm-hmm.
but especially my freshmen, who I mostly teach in these big classes, got lost of finding stuff in our Blackboard version that we used to have. And I never did modules, you know, and sort of only made this module visible at a time. Because it was like, it's all there. There's all this, you know, just click the discussions and there's every discussion. And the web links are right there, you know, and I maybe had folders, but they were all visible. So it's like, where are they? And that's helped me to understand, to minimize that more and make only what we need right now visible as much, and make it more obvious what the labels are. And I think D2L will ultimately help. I'm still not sure about the visibility, but it's the web links are going to be in the module. There's no more web links that they have to like look for here, even though I linked them in the module, but it just got confusing for students. And so I think that has helped me to streamline for all students.
Okay,
And
so
make it
simplify.
easier to find things in the online course management system.
Great.
Because the semester that we did the flash mob, so we had, you know, the practice videos and all of this stuff up there, and they're going, I don't know where to find things. I want to practice. I can't find. It's so busy. That was the thing. And I try and make folders different colors, thinking that was helpful. And photos, you know, the practice of us dancing, a little photo for the dancing video. But it actually was stressing them.
Okay.
You know, and so that message from students, make it more simple, has been a very profound one for me on the online course management system.
Outstanding. And maybe it'll help after time, if it hasn't already, it will help you to,
Yes,
to
you know,
organize material.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Good, good. So, as a sociologist, because you are one, so I'm going to take advantage of that.
Sure.
How do you believe the field of disability studies might influence our work on campus?
Well, I'm hopeful that sometime in maybe the next 5 years we can have another cup of coffee and celebrate having a minor, at least in disability studies.
That would be
I mean, I think
fantastic.
that, if not a major, but at least a minor.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the impetus, the number of faculty are growing, you know, so then it's like getting people together and sitting around and hashing out the courses and things like that. But I do think that can come and probably will come. And what it's nice is it's just not the two of us. You know, we now have seated some other people who are interested, and we've hired faculty who are interested. And it's like, oh, so now they're finding us and we're finding them, you know, and there is this core that I think will make that happen. But I also think you continually, I don't know if it's a good model, but chipping away at the language, the sort of legalistic language of your office. Some you don't have complete control over, but like the forms you do, and you have changed them so much, and people go, it just isn't like it used to be.
Which is a good thing.
Exactly. You know, and I sometimes will go, you know, because married to another faculty, we tend to socialize a lot with faculty. Well, what do you mean? You know, when I press them, it's often like, it isn't as much like I need a lawyer to read their forms.
Yes.
The legalese is often gone,
Right.
you know, and it's more personable, you know, and I just feel like then I can work with the student and sit down and we can sort of talk about it. And I know that it's okay to ask a student, and then if they don't want to say it, then, you know, you back off. But that sense of fear on campus is less.
So the work that we've done together and independently,
And your staff.
reading, learning more about disability studies, somehow, I think pretty intentionally on our part,
Right.
but it is impacting, you said the student seems more human than they did before,
Yeah, well,
which is terrible that but before it seemed like they were a pawn.
yeah,
almost.
or a potential case,
Right,
you know, that I'm
right,
going to be sued,
right.
you know, that, you know, so there was this sense of if I screw this up, I'm going to see him in court,
Yeah.
you know, or in EEOC or somewhere that I don't want to be,
Right.
you know, kind of thing. And now it's like, you know, let's just sit down and let's talk. How can I help you to succeed? What do you need? And it's more of that conversational, and the form, I mean, it still has the legal components that it needs to, but the way you phrased it isn't quite as much like I need to go grab a law dictionary.
Yes.
And I think students appreciate that too. I would guess that they and their parents are much more open. They feel that this is more of a friendlier place for them and a more sort of open.
We get a lot of good feedback, especially if a student's coming from a different, maybe transferring.
Right. That's different.
I'm hoping, you know, a lot of campuses are working on these changes.
Right.
So I think that maybe in the future that won't be so much, wow, nobody else does it like this, because more and more people are thinking about what we're required to do and what we should do. And we've talked, you know.
And that's where I think that we have to still do more, not just us, but IT, e-learning, about universal design. So that becomes, especially in our online components or completely in online courses, the standard. And then it's not, there may be minor tweaks of software or something that we might have to do for a particular student's needs,
Right.
but that most of how the courses are on there, that you're putting documents in multiple formats, is just that's the way we do things
That's
here.
the norm.
That's right.
Right.
And so that will probably take and solve, a lot of faculty fears if they know I'm doing the way most students need and give choices of how to access documents in 3 ways. And I think that will also help. And so that we're getting there. I think we need to do more, and I think we need some more instructional technologists. I mean, we all know we do, but in budget times that's tight, but that's certainly something, but more faculty want to know.
Mm-hmm. And you and I have worked pretty closely with e-learning, which was really helpful, because going to a department on my own saying, hey, we need to do this, doesn't show that there's buy-in by the faculty who will be presenting the courses online. So by us going together and you saying, as a faculty member, when I'm trained on the software, I want to know what I need to do to make it accessible. Because we used to do it separate. Here's how you do things, and then here's how you do them accessibly. And we were able to influence some change working together to say, here's how we do it. And the accessibility is all built in, because that's what we do, not as an accommodation.
And I think that's certainly more in our transition to the desire to learn. In the trainings that I've had for that, that's more right there. Sort of as we're all learning this new software,
and here's
it is
how you
more
do
accessible, and here's how to do it.
Yes.
And it's like, yes, it's like a victory.
You don't need to do another training about access, because we expect that from you all the time.
That's right. I mean, there's still the refreshers and things grow and get better, but that sense of, here's the basics, and this is just how to do it.
You've been to one of the D2L trainings. Was there any legalese or legal mandates brought in, or was it just, here's how you do it? Because I know we used to have that.
I mean, I think there was a little bit of the legalese when somebody asked about captioning in videos.
Oh, yes, right.
But otherwise it was, you should, get your documents in the 3 forms. If it's longer than 4 or 5 pages of Word document, you probably want to do the table of contents.
Right.
And do the linked table of contents. And that was just, here's how you do it.
Here's how you do it. Great. That's what we wanted.
Mm-hmm.
So as a wrap-up, Kathe, what would you want disability service providers who are just starting to reimagine their offices and their campuses, what would you want them to know about working with faculty that might help them work together with their faculty to design inclusive, sustainable environments on campus? Are there a few, you gotta do this or you should do this?
Most of us don't bite. You
Some
know what I
do.
mean? Some do.
Yeah.
I agree. And, and you'll probably find those, but I think most, find a couple that are really passionate about partners and that have some respect on campus that can be those partners. But I think most will be eager to learn. There will be the sort of ogre bears that don't want to change and so forth, and you may have to do the legalese with them. But I think most, especially younger faculty, have more knowledge about accessibility and universal design and that it ought to be being done.
Right.
So that they may bring you the knowledge or have that knowledge that they just want to sort of tap into more of what you may know than just like don't know anything. But don't assume it's going to be a war. And I think that was more the sort of 70s and some 80 models, that we're not on the same page and we're never going to be, you got to force us and corral us to do the right legal thing. And I think now we're more eager for that partnership, and have those kind of, maybe have some just open times, what do you think about how we're doing, or have a time where here's our documents, let's brainstorm if there are ways to phrase them better.
Right.
You're probably not going to get a zillion faculty there, but you'll get the ones who care.
Right.
And they'll probably have some of those better, ideas to kick out. Doesn't mean you have to follow them, and that's still your expertise.
Right.
But that sense of, I think, trying to partner again and find some. But recognize it isn't going to be everybody. And I'm sure you have a couple faculty, you have a
Most
mental...
are gone.
No, but I mean, you have a mental list where, if you get on the intercom, so-and-so is calling, you're probably like, oh, let me go gird my loins, because I think often when we called, the assumption was it's a problem.
Right.
And I think now it's, how can we create a solution? And that's that sea
Together.
change.
Mm-hmm.
That it's not, I have a problem, but, I'm brainstorming solutions, and it's not that I have a problem or this student is a problem, but it's how can we help the student to succeed? And even though we may end up with the same thing, that is a way different way into the conversation.
It sure is a lot more pleasant, isn't it?
I bet especially for you and for students, which is ultimately who we are all about.
For all of us, which is really what we're trying to do here. So I appreciate it so much. Thank you.
Sure.
And
it's been so fun working with you, and I can't wait to know more.
Next cup of coffee.
That's right. Or tea.
Or tea. Thanks, Kathe.
You bet.